We fool ourselves into thinking, I do my best work at crunch time. That's bullshit. That's adrenaline kicking in, right? You get it done, but it's not your best work. When you're prepared, like Steve Jobs prepared for a keynote, that's when you do your best work. The misconception I had was that everybody was gonna have the same drive as me, right? Ooh. But if they did, then they're not employees, they're called competitors. They wouldn't be working for me, they would be in the same pitch that I'm in. The proof is in the pudding, right? If we walked in and we were talking about a pitch and we were gonna build your website, I would say, why don't you Google whatever you did to find and end up in this chair? Google website development, Google website design, Google whatever it is, and see where we show up. The cobbler's son has no shoes is bullshit. If you can't do your own stuff, how am I gonna trust you to do mine? Everybody has great ideas, but the difference between those that succeed and those that don't, or those that...
We have a special guest, Ryan. This is my good friend. Met Keith, I don't know, maybe 4 years ago, and I reached out to him on his website. But we have a special guest, Keith Roberts, entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, has exited a company, now doing executive and leadership coaching, keynote speaking, and is just one of the most incredible humans. Welcome to the Gridiron and Growth podcast, The Zen Man. Welcome.
Welcome.
Thanks,
Keith,
guys.
Man,
Honor to be here.
Really appreciate you joining the show, and I know you brought Quinny along. Well, let's dive into your entrepreneurial journey. I've known you for quite a while now. You go out and you test the boundaries, you test the limits. So talk a little bit about your journey and your entrepreneurship journey.
Yeah. So all I've ever wanted to do was be a photographer, to be an artist. So I did a year of photography as a starving artist, and it did not align with my expectations and my lifestyle. So I broke down, man. Literally the last week of my unemployment, I was like, I got to do something. I'll get a job as a designer. That's kind of like being a photographer. I lied on my application and my resume.
Love it.
Literally got the job and didn't have money to buy the book to learn the software. So I went to like Barnes and Noble and took notes in a notepad, like looking at books, cranked it out at that job. That's what moved me here. In about 2 years, went from designer to leading the design team as a manager. That company was acquired, moved me out here to Denver. Like with most acquisitions, there's overlap in talent. So I took a voluntary layoff. And I had basically a 6 months free roll of like, if I can do it now, this is when I can do it. So I started Zen Man. Literally, it's ironic that we're here because it's one block from here, 33rd and Blake, and we're at 34th and Blake in the studio.
Yeah.
Is where Zen Man started. So I used to have a loft in Fireclay, and I was just building websites under the stairs in my loft, meeting clients at the Ink Coffee on Riverfront.
Yeah.
And then, we grew over 25 years from, working with like Bonanno and different restaurateurs to building the Lumineers site or, Remax's website.
What I love most about that story is you said you went to Barnes and Noble, didn't buy the book, but took notes.
I couldn't afford the book.
Irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
I mean, your willingness to work and to do something that everybody else thinks you're crazy doing. Where does that come from, and how come more people, in your experience, don't do what it takes to get where they want to go?
I'm going to attribute this one to my mom's. So my mom and her brother and sister grew up in rural Indiana, so poor for a couple years they were actually taken away by welfare from her mom. And seeing the work ethic that my mom has and the grind, right? I mean, I think everybody has great ideas, but the difference between those that succeed and those that don't, or those that are willing to do the hard work, and just always, had the drive and willingness to do the work.
Mm-hmm. It's incredible. I think something that's why, you and I are friends is that, your work ethic and you being determined. Talk to us a little bit about Zen Man. So you're building it, but talk a little bit about what got you to the next level. People talk about 0 to 1, but like what took you to the next level? Talk a little bit about that journey of, okay, when did Zen Man start to become successful? Because how do you get to build the website for the Lumineers or Remax? How do you get to that point?
It was building a reputation. We were doing what I would call D clients. You don't get to play in the big leagues until you've proven yourself. And it took probably 9 years to get our first shot at the big leagues, and in all honesty, flailed horribly, like to the point of ending up in multiple lawsuits with contractors that we brought in.
I mean, those are the things that, and you sold Zen Man a couple of years ago. I remember celebrating with you as you sold Zen Man.
Yeah.
But those are the things that you don't always hear about. in entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship is not always sexy. Yeah, it's not easy at all. It's all the time.
Yeah.
And talk about those nights of working on Zen Man and working on projects.
I mean, one of the things after that did get me there, eBags, a big Colorado company. They started here. They're down in the tech center. It was one of those jobs where, they kept making changes and, delays, etc. And I actually had pneumonia in one of my lungs, bought a 4-pack of Red Bull and a thing of Odwalla, and just worked all night and finished the job.
No way.
Now,
Dedication.
I advocate in my coaching and in my speaking that people don't do that. I would always get it done. I would always, deliver. But if I had been more methodical in my planning, then I wouldn't have put myself in that situation. I could have stayed in the hospital, maybe not even had pneumonia. And in all honesty, I would have done better work. But we fool ourselves into thinking, I do my best work at crunch time. That's bullshit. That's adrenaline kicking in, right? You get it done, but it's not your best work. When you're prepared, like Steve Jobs prepared for a keynote, that's when you do your best work.
What are some key steps for people who may be in a spot where they're like, man, I know what he's talking about with the burnout. I have no idea how to prepare better. What are some key things that people can do to create a process that gives that space for performance and preparation?
I have a mentor, Warren Rustan. He taught me a technique called the 10-10-10. It's 10 minutes of meditation followed by 10 minutes of reading and then 10 minutes of journaling. And that meditation helps with clarity, with focus. It reduces our cortisol, increases our serotonin, oxytocin. Reading helps continue with that clarity. It inspires creativity. It helps you retain information. It lowers our risk of Alzheimer's and dementia. Also, you get to learn cool things, right? Or enjoy a story. Journaling aligns your intentions. I very, very much believe just journal positive thoughts. I just read this really interesting thing. Einstein and Tesla were huge fans of naps in the afternoon. But what Tesla used to do was he would almost meditate when he was taking his nap, and he would hold a spoon above a metal pie tin. And so when he would actually fall asleep, that would wake him up. But he attributes so many of his really creative or innovative ideas coming to him in that state between wake and sleep.
Wow. That might be the best answer we got to a question the whole season, man.
Can you talk a little bit about the hiring process? I know that just from conversations that you and I have had, that the hiring process was key for you. And I don't know if you hired a COO or a CEO, but you found out what lights you up in your zone of genius, and then you hired somebody else to help fill in the gaps. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think sometimes as entrepreneurs, we feel like we have to do it all, or sometimes you do have to do it yourself. But talk a little bit about when you start to scale Zen Man.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you what I did wrong, and then I'll tell you how we fixed it 15 years later. In the beginning, I was hiring whoever I could afford and thinking that I could train them on how to do things. And the misconception I had was that everybody was going to have the same drive as me, right? Ooh. But if they did, then they're not employees, they're called competitors, right? They wouldn't be working for me, they would be in the same pitch that I'm in. Hiring is the biggest and most challenging thing, and that's one of the reasons I've really pivoted the business that I do now that I've sold the agency after 2.5 decades of employees. I'm no employees. I do public speaking, I book my own flights, I book my own hotels, I talk with everybody. I don't even have a VA, and that's my capacity, and I'm cool with that. But I very much feel good just owning everything.
Love that.
When you talk about you can walk in and get a $500,000 deal, how? What are the keys to landing clients at that dollar amount? Yeah,
that's a great question, Ryan. There were a couple things. One, the proof is in the pudding, right? If we walked in and we were talking about a pitch and we were going to build your website, I would say, why don't you Google whatever you did to find and end up in this chair? Google website development, Google website design, Google whatever it is, and see where we show up, right? The cobbler's son has no shoes is bullshit, right? If you can't do your own stuff, how am I going to trust you to do mine?
Wow. Yeah. What questions would you ask, though? Like you want this client, what question are you asking them to open up or to get to that yes that makes everybody happy in the room?
It's two different questions. My favorite question in the discovery process was, if your business was a band or a song, what would it be and why? And so then we got so much out of it, right? Like if you asked me on Zen Man, I would say Danny Elfman, who nobody knows who Danny Elfman is, right? But Danny Elfman arguably is the greatest composer of the 21st century. Ooh. He was the founder of one of my favorite bands. Again, I'm going to age myself, Oingo Boingo. Their farewell concert was 1995,
wow.
right?
All right?
So a little bit old. But Danny Elfman is a composer. So every Tim Burton movie, with the exception of the Batman that Prince did, the soundtrack to The Simpsons, the soundtrack to Tales from the Crypt. I mean, this guy has done everything. And his compositions, it's so broad. So when I would say that about Zen Man, it's because you could be the Lumineers, or you could be Frank Bonanno, or you could be Remax, and we're going to understand your needs, and we're going to produce something that is the best possible product for your unique challenge. It was actually the description of the song or the band that we got the most information out of. Now,
that's a great question, because people have to thoughtfully think about that.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, this.
Yeah.
You have to think about that. That's a great question.
And it's a fun question, right? You actually can get engaged with that. So it's actually just listening to people and not immediately waiting for that like half a millisecond so I can start talking. But I always wait 3 seconds. There's a great article I read about this 20 years ago, Power of the Pause. It does two things. One, it allows me to actually think about the answer so I don't stick my foot in my mouth.
Analyze it. Yeah.
And two, it gives you the impression, even if I already know my response, that I've been genuinely listening and I'm thinking about what you said before I respond. So it feels more like I'm hearing you.
Let's dive into the Eternal Flame. You know, you being an author, and then also the Oak Journal Method, two books that you have given me.
That you just gave
to Ryan.
Yeah,
but
man.
please, talk a little bit about the Oak Journal Method, which I know started first, and then the Eternal Flame.
So the Oak Journal is a 90-day structured journal, and this came out of a program I did at MIT called the Entrepreneur Master's Program. And I did this program. It's where I met Warren Rustan, and I had this realization. This was about 18 years into the agency that I was trading my time for money. And there's a really crappy deal because time is the only finite resource we have. So I left and thought, what can I create that's a product that I can make money when I sleep, that I can use the skills that I've developed over the 30 years in business. And the idea was the Oak Journal. So that took me about a year to create, design, iterate on, test with different users, and that's how I accidentally became a public speaker. The book, The Eternal Flame, our good friend Ryan Avery, who is much younger than me, but he's like a big brother. I've learned so much from that kid. We went and had vegan sushi, which I do not recommend. It was awful. And we sat down, we were talking about AI and all the different opportunities that were out there. And he said, do you want to write a book together? I was trying to explain my keynote and that what a bodhisattva is. A bodhisattva is a Buddhist who their purpose in this life is to help others reach enlightenment, not themselves. And so we decided to write this book. So The Eternal Flame is a story of Dawa. It's a woman that grew up in Tibet. She's born and lived in her death in Tibet 700 years ago. It's a historical fiction that's really accurate, which was super fun as a Buddhist to like, can a Buddhist monk like ride a horse? Do they have apricots in Nepal? Like all these different things we had to research. And everything is spot on except for the end where the mala necklace comes from. We took a little liberty in making that a creative story. But you learn lessons in leadership through sort of ancient Eastern wisdom. And this actually led to, I'm writing a book right now called the Zen of Business. It started as the Buddhist Entrepreneur for Wiley & Sons, and it's evolved now through the naming process. It's been pretty fun. But yeah, the Zen of Business will come out in April.
Love it.
Wow. And that goes to one thing that I'd love for you to talk about with your Buddhist teachings, and I assume Buddhist practices
Yes,
at some point. One of my favorite concepts of Buddhism is Dharma. Tell the people what Dharma is.
Dharma is the community itself, right? It is the network of other Buddhists that we lift each other up. And it's, there's karma, there's Dharma, and that is essential to that. And that's one of the things. It's funny because Elizabeth, a friend of mine, is frustrated. She felt that me writing this book on Buddhism and entrepreneurship was actually oppressing this culture. And what I've been trying to share is that is the opposite. It is very much a Buddhist principle to share these things. If everybody was a part of that Dharma, then our whole global frequency and vibration would be elevated, right? And that's one of the reasons why I love teaching people transcendental meditation. It's a great technique, but it's $2,000 to learn TM. If you want to learn TM, just Google TM mantra by age, and the age that you are when you learn TM, that's the mantra. I understand, they say there's a value in paying for it, that you learn it, but if we just gave it to 8 billion people, the world would be a better place. So, and that's one of the things, just give.
That's the number one way to build your Dharma, just to give to others.
Yeah, it comes back sevenfold.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Everybody, Mr. Keith Roberts, the Zen Man. Appreciate you for having me, man.
Thanks
for coming on.
Appreciate you.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Gridiron and Growth with your co-host Ryan Harris and myself. Big shout out to Big Up Studios and Streamline Media for all their help with everything that we do. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Please leave a review, and please send us any questions at the gridironandgrowthpod@gmail.com.